Good morning. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and we have an incredible panel lined up for you today. So I'm only going to take a second to make sure that you know how it is that we'll be accepting questions during today's Lunch and Learn. And we do ask, please look for the question box on your GoToWebinar panel and find that box, and if you wouldn't mind, drop me a hi or hello in there just so I know that you found it, because that's the area we will be accepting questions. Our moderator for today will be stopping periodically to ask me if any questions are in there, so I want to make sure you all know where it is that you need to put those. We got some good hi, hello, good mornings rolling in, so we're good there. All right, I'm going to turn things over to Brian Moore, who is the chapter president for Central Ohio APWA chapter, and he is going to be handling our Lunch and Learn today. Are you there, Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Moore. I'm the Columbus Transportation Leader for Arcadis and the current president of the Central Ohio APWA chapter. It's really hard to believe that we're now 2 months into this stay-at-home order. I think that name has changed now. And it's really just changed our daily lives in many different ways. About a month ago, we shared how operations within various Central Ohio organizations have changed, along with those positive changes that will most likely stick around here into the near future. So this morning, we'd like to share an update. We'd like to dig into some questions that you all asked on that last webinar and have a conversation about engaging the public in what this might look like in the future. Also, this week we are celebrating the National Public Works Week. These individuals are in our communities doing some really just amazing work as first responders and essential employees. So if you see any of them, you talk to any of them, just be sure to thank them for all their hard work. So joining me today are several guests from 5 Central Ohio communities or agencies. We've got Cindy Fitzpatrick, the Public Service Director for Grove City. We have Larry Lester, the Deputy Director of Public Service for the City of Hilliard. We have Lewis McFarland, General Manager of Earnhardt Hill Regional Water and Sewer District. Jackie Thiel, Director of Public Service Department and City Engineer with the City of Upper Arlington. And Dan Whited, Director of Service and Engineering for the City of Worthington. So I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day to share your experiences on today's topic. So let's kick off the conversation today about our work environment. So for me, working 1 to 2 days from home was fairly normal, but really not working from home every day. So to stay connected with my group and the group that I work with, we're doing video call check-ins every other day, having conversations every day, whether that's through an IM, phone calls. And while we mostly discuss work-related topics, we do have some fun with that. Sometimes our kids or pets will join us. Sometimes we might get someone to play the guitar. And yeah, we even hear a bad dad joke every now and then, which puts a smile on everybody's face. And it just really helps with that personal connection with our teammates. Now, I think for many government agencies, working from home maybe has not been the normal way of doing business. So I want to kind of dive into this a little bit with our guest here today. So Jackie, Upper Arlington, I know, has several staff members working from home. And for an agency that didn't do that on a day-to-day basis, you could talk a little bit about how you and your staff have made that adjustment.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, for many government agencies, working from home is pretty much unheard of until COVID hit. So we quickly had to go into action and figure out how to make this transition. As I spoke about at our previous webinar, for our public works and fleet and electrical section, that's just really not possible. We need them on the streets doing their jobs. So we used administrative leave for them and broke them into shifts. I'm happy to report we are all back at work now and reporting to our separation units. But for engineering and GIS and other departments of government, we are able to do our jobs from home. So one of the biggest IT struggles was, getting people platforms so that they could work from home. We were able to get many of our staff members laptops, that mimic the same desktop that they have at home. And then for other staff members, just because there were not enough laptops available even for purchase, we worked with IT, and they were actually able to take their desktops home. And we tracked all of that, so we know where all of our equipment is and who was taking what home. But what we have found is over the last 2 months, this has worked really well, and we are just as efficient at home using different platforms to communicate with each other. And I know we video chat almost every day with each other, keeping each other up to date. So we found that it's actually been working really well. And the people that can continue to work from home are at this point, just so that we can keep the people that can't do their job from home safe, trying to keep as many people away from each other as possible as we continue to navigate through these times.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Especially like overcoming that IT challenge. I know for me, another challenge I had was just here I went from working from a house that was a couple of days a week that was usually very empty and quiet to now everybody is home and trying to deal with, okay, how do you carve out this space in your home so you can have that quiet space to have these conversations and whatnot. So have you, at least I know with you, with different, you've got small kids. How have you kind of managed with that as well?
Well, I think everyone has been very understanding to people working at home with small children. And if you get a little girl popping in on a video of mine, it's no surprise, and it brings a smile to many people's faces. We've definitely had to come up with a structure at our house. So my kids know that when I'm in a video meeting, that is not a time to come and ask mom questions or tell mom you're hungry. And then we work around those times. So, overall, my day has gotten a little bit longer, but that's because I'm taking breaks throughout the day to help my children in between the meetings. And I think most people are doing this, and everyone's been very understanding that we're all doing the best we can, and we're making it work pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. I know I've had a couple of kids in our house kind of crawling on the floor, trying to sneak under the camera, and it definitely puts a smile on people's faces too, because it's just how life is. Larry, I know much of your staff is still out on the front line and not really able to work from home. So how have things evolved since the last update you gave us?
Thanks, Brian. In the initial webinar, we talked about our 3 work groups and 2-week schedule rotation. Since then, we've returned to full duty this past Monday. We are currently operating in 3 subgroups: mobile, staged, and normal. Maintenance technicians who work in the mobile work group took their city trucks, tools, and iPads home with them, and they're reporting directly to the job site from their homes. Breaks are taken at their respective homes, and they can report to the Hilliard Service Center once per week during a scheduled time to pick up any necessary materials and supplies. And our crew leaders are also delivering materials and supplies to the field. The second group is our mobile or our staged work group. And in that work group, we've actually staged city vehicles near the employee parking lot. These individuals can go from their personal vehicle directly into a city vehicle and report to the job site as well. They are staggering their breaks at the service center, and we have asked them not to congregate in our buildings or service yard. And last is our normal work group. This work group is similar to the work group that we operated under during the 2-week rotation. This group reports to one of 3 buildings at the service center, and our goal has been all along to keep 4 to 5 employees per building and maintain that through the pandemic. That has worked well for us. And also our centralized call center and mobile 301 system is operating offsite until June 1st. During this schedule change or these 3 scenarios, employees do have the opportunity to work through lunch, and they can end their day a half an hour early if they choose. As far as time tracking, we've asked our employees not to use the biometric time clocks during this time. Instead, they're tracking their time and submitting daily forms through a mobile app in our time management system. And also, I want to note that as far as each of our groups, we did the mobile group on a volunteer basis. We approached maintenance technicians who live in or just outside of Hilliard limits if they would want to volunteer for that effort. We've had a great response out of these 3 scenarios from our union reps and our team members. Our approach is different than other communities that I'm hearing, so it has worked for us to date.
Oh, that's great to hear. Dan, over in the city of Worthington, why don't you tell us how working remotely has been going for your organization there?
Well, thanks, Brian, and thanks everybody for joining us today. It's worked really well for us, very similar to what Jackie mentioned. We have maintained a very high level of productivity, seem to have more meetings, but those meetings are more productive and they're well planned out as opposed to the normal interruptive meetings you can get on a day-to-day basis when you're off in the office. There are some challenges with it. You know, sometimes we'll have technical difficulties. We hold our public meetings remotely as well with Teams, and we had some issues the other night at our council meeting during the storms with people getting frozen up on their presentations. But overall, it's been generally good. Personally, I don't have any children at home, but I do have a dog that likes to make her presence known on occasion. From our perspective, I guess one of the biggest advantages is it kind of forced us into acknowledging the benefits of technology and how we can use them. And we've gotten pretty adept at using Teams and SharePoint and some of the other bells and whistles that come along with this type of opportunity, going into VPN, those sorts of things that have really kind of helped us make better use of our time and our resources. And I should say that our remote workers were our GIS and engineering folks, as well as some of our administration people. And we had our administrative office manager actually worked from home using MyTel to take calls direct from the office when was still able to route them to each one of the individuals. So it was really very seamless. You wouldn't even have known she wasn't in the office at the time. So in all, it's been generally really good. We're having some new challenges as we transition back into the reopening plans, but we can talk about those at a later time, I think, within this cast.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's go down to Grove City here with Cindy. And I know Grove City took on maybe a little bit different approach where you guys were working from the office, but you guys put in a lot of measures in place to keep yourself and the staff safe. So how are things operating right now, and maybe how do you see things coming along in the coming months?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, we are a very lean organization as a whole, but especially in public service. So we didn't have enough staff to be able to kind of do the rotations that were described by Upper Arlington and Hilliard and still maintain the level of service for our residents that we needed to. So we did take a different approach. We had our service technicians split into 2 shifts and go the first half doing 6:30 to 2:30 and the other half doing 3 to 11. And then we rotate that every other week. So you're on days a week, then evenings a week. We're continuing that approach, and we expect that to go on for a little while yet. But I have to say that I think that many of us feel fortunate that we're still able to safely come to work, and that overall our routines aren't totally disrupted. We do have a few individuals working from home since our buildings are not open to the public. Our administrative assistants are working from home, and my service superintendent is working from home. So anyone that was able to efficiently do their jobs from home, we've allowed that, and our IS department, like everyone else here, has been very flexible and adaptable and providing the resources and things they need to do that. But like I said, the vast majority of us have continued to work full time. We did we have implemented some policies and issued some PPE and different things that we needed to be able to do that safely. So every day, all of our employees log on to a mobile app that they can do from their phone to do a health screening. They take their temperature and enter it in, answer a few questions. We've issued face masks to all of our employees and have deployed disposable ones for any visitors or guests that we do, arrange to come into the complex, so that everyone in common areas are wearing face masks, or if they're working together. Otherwise, we have tried to make sure that one person assigned to a vehicle at a time, and those vehicles are disinfected at the beginning and end of shift before the other half of our group comes in. And then making sure that everybody has the, gloves, sanitizer, all that kind of stuff that they need to properly clean our workspaces and any shared equipment or vehicles. So I think that it's working so far, and for the foreseeable future, we'll continue this approach.
Very good. Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. Good key word there is adaptable, and it just seems like those that are being very adaptable are seeing a lot of successes within their organization. So glad you brought that up. Lewis, so the last time we talked, you pointed out some really cool positives that have come about from working from home and your staff working from home. So maybe as a recap, can you just kind of touch on those positives, and how do you see those continuing into the future?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. We are seeing some efficiencies in staff working and reporting directly from their home. And I have to give credit to our employees for making this situation work. We've given them a lot of leeway to create a productive work pattern and still serve our customers. And productivity has increased on just about every assignment. GIS tasks are getting completed quickly. Our engineering review processes and job site observation is getting completed. Our data entry and analysis on our treatment side is happening quickly. So happy with how that's all working together. In fact, our field crews are finding more time in their daily activities to perform maintenance. And I think that's due in large part by we're not meeting in the office every morning, and that consumes time to talk about assignments and dispatch. As far as our office crews go, we've invested in some phone software, so with voice over IP technology, and of course VPN connections. It's already been mentioned. Our customer service reps work directly from home, and our customers see no change whatsoever in the level of service, which is great. And the great thing is we're not slipping at all on compliance or maintenance activities, which was my biggest concern initially. So I think the lesson here on our end is just looking at how you carve up your day time-wise, and to try to look at what's going to benefit the district in the long run. And I think this reporting directly from home, being creative on where you report and when, I think is going to go a long way towards that.
Yeah, I think a common theme I'm kind of gathering through all of your responses here is having some technology. We've got the technology in place, and the creativity, and the adaptability. So I guess really three things. So that's great to hear. So let's kind of transition to another subject here that really came out of questions from our last webinar, and we got several questions about unions. And there are many of us that really don't typically deal with unions within our organizations, but I know three of our guests here do deal with that on a daily basis. So let me start off with Cindy, and I know you've been very engaged with your union employees. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're working with the unions during this crisis?
Sure, yeah. The vast majority of my staff are part of the APWA union. And I think the biggest thing is just explaining to folks what you're doing and why. And then it's really for their protection. And so, down to the black and white of a contract. It certainly says in there that management has the right to dictate the working hours. And so, we didn't necessarily have to get approval to split the shifts that we did, but we definitely wanted to share with our staff, what we were doing and why, and how we would navigate those waters. So for us, it's been pretty seamless. We haven't had any issues as far as the unions go, but that's the approach we've taken.
All right, very good. And Jackie, there in Upper Arlington, I guess what's it been like working with the unions there for you?
Yeah, we have 20 of our public works service workers that are part of the Teamsters Union. And, much like Cindy, what we've found is communication has been the most important aspect of this. So each time we've gone through a transition of our operations, we've been sure to send that to the union ahead of time, as much notice as we can give them, and make sure that they understand what the operations plan is, and to provide us any feedback or questions you have. We really haven't gotten much feedback. Everyone's understanding that we are all in this together, navigating and doing the best that we can. And that communication has helped us immensely. And, I think everybody just honestly wants to help and be a part of getting us back to normal as quickly as possible. And I'm thankful for that. And to date, we have not had any issues.
All right, that's awesome to hear. Larry, I know unions are also part of Hilliard over there, so maybe just tell us a little bit about your experience within your organization and the unions.
Our maintenance technicians and custodians are represented by the United Steelworkers. We have a great relationship with our union and our employees, and I mentioned this in the first session that the key is to communicate frequently, and also the concept of servant leadership, which is prevalent in our organization. As Jackie mentioned, we are also continually communicating our work plans and any operational changes to our union representatives and team members. We ask for their input on a routine basis. And overall, our employees and union representatives are satisfied with how city leadership has been proactive in guiding change through the pandemic. We've really been viewed as being, on the forefront of doing things differently than other communities, and we continually get great feedback from our union.
All right, very good. I guess I just want to pause just 1 second as a reminder that if you've got any questions for our guest here today, feel free to put those in the chat box, the question box here, and we will get to those a little bit later on. So let's move on to the economic impact this is having on your organizations. I think to no one's surprise, many budgets are being impacted right now. Maybe expenditures are being reduced. I know for our organization, travel's been put on hold for at least the next several months. It's kind of trickling down even to our internships. We typically have internships going all year long, and a lot of the ones that are starting this summer, especially those that are new internships, are being not canceled, but being delayed a little bit. And so I know for us, a challenge with these internships is we really like to use these as a mentorship for them. And that's definitely a challenge to figure out how to do remotely. I know I just had a co-op end his term with us, but he's been working with us for a while. So remote working was really no big deal, but somebody brand new to the organization or just still in school and not ever working in the engineering field, it's definitely going to be a little bit of a challenge. So we've decided to do more of a part-time internship where they're working maybe 3 days a week, and we're making sure that we've got at least one engineer in there every day so they can bounce ideas and questions off of them. So I'm guessing that there's going to be a lot of impacts to your organizations, whether it's for seasonal hiring seasonal help, or maybe your interns during the summer months, or even other things. So let's start with Cindy here. What impacts are you seeing there in Grove City?
Yeah, Brian, it was, I think as soon as the stay-at-home order was put in place, everybody got a little tense about what that would mean for budgets. And we, like a lot of places, implemented a hiring freeze, and we aren't filling vacant positions at the moment in preparation of what we anticipate to be reductions in income tax collections and our other revenue sources. So yeah, like you mentioned, we typically do bring on an intern. We participate in the MORPSI internship program, and unfortunately, we're just not this summer. As far as seasonal help, we literally could not maintain the grounds and the infrastructure that we have without our seasonal help. And we start that process in February and hiring in March. So a lot of those were already brought on prior to a lot of the COVID-19, and we've kept them on to maintain the work that we need to do, but we aren't hiring any additional. Sometimes once school lets out, we'll bring on some more summer help, seasonal part-time workers, and we're not bringing on any more at this point. We're trying to maintain with what we have. But there's definitely economic impacts. I think we're going to continue to see those as we progress through this. I know that in April, we didn't really see revenue drops, but I don't think that it had caught up with us. There's a little bit of lag in that. I talked to my finance director today, and in May, as far as income tax collections, we are down $500,000 from what we were last year. But he did make a point of clarity, which I thought was interesting, that our income tax withholdings are still looking relatively the same, but the extensions that were offered to people is causing a downturn in what we've actually collected. So I don't know if you want to get into some of the other tax-based and economic impacts yet, or if you want to stick to the hiring and interns, that type of stuff, Brian. But
Yeah, no, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, yeah, maybe share with everyone here kind of what is the makeup of Grove City's tax base there. I think really once we get through all of our guests here, I think everybody be interested in kind of hearing about that.
Sure, yeah. So for us, all of our top 10 employers that make up the majority of our income tax revenue, fortunately, have remained open and operational. We have Walmart's distribution center in Grove City. We have a major hub for FedEx. We have 2 hospitals and the school district, Southwestern City School District, all within our community. And with them working in full force and even upticking a little bit, as well as some of the manufacturing that we have, the income tax collections remain relatively strong. None of the restaurants and retail are certainly being hit within their business plans, but within Grove City, they are not in our top 10 of income tax collections. We are seeing a major dip in our hotel motel fees that we collect. We are only receiving about 30% of what we normally receive, and we were actually surprised that we were seeing that because in communications we've heard a lot of hotels only maintaining about 10% occupancy at the moment since folks just aren't traveling. And for Grove City, annually we typically get nearly $1 million from hotel motel tax, so 30% of that, if that continues through the year, is significant. We've also been trying to track the fuel tax impacts. With people working from home and not traveling as much, you're not as much fuel consumption out there, and so trying to look at what that means. A lot of my major tasks with street maintenance are funded from those revenues, so it's important that we're tracking that. And it's also a little bit difficult to track because with the increased gas tax that was passed last year, the forecasts and what's coming in are a little bit different. But working through the numbers we're seeing right now, our finance director reports that we're down for the month of May approximately 15%, but we expect that to have a little bit more of a downturn.
Yeah, I mean the fuel tax, that's the good point there. I know for myself, I filled up my tank last week. I think that was the first time since the end of February that I actually had filled up. So I don't think I'm alone there. Dan, similar question for you. I guess what as far as like seasonal help goes, internships, what are you guys seeing there in Worthington?
Sure, Brian. I'll kind of start in another direction and tell you where our revenues come from. And we are heavily dependent on income tax. About 70% of our revenue comes from that. The remainder is from property tax, from interest on investments, fines and forfeitures, which are down. Community center, our revenue from our parks program and our community center are obviously down because it's been closed, and we're giving refunds to those who have paid. So we're actually seeing deficits or debits to our system because of that. And then like Grove City, we rely on gas and license tax as well. Our income tax comes from some pretty heavy hitters, Worthington Industries. Income payments. And our revenue 90 are enrollment programs. So it goes without saying we're hurting. And our May collections were down 25%. It's not easy to tell whether or not how soon that will rebound, but certainly the pushing the deadline out will have an impact on that as well, or the tax filing deadline will have an impact on that as well. So what have we done? We've done what we refer to as a Moscow analysis to prioritize our capital improvement programs, what we must do, what we should do, what we could do, and what we just won't do because we don't foresee having the funds to be able to sufficiently apply that level of service. And with that, we went through and established what were our most important CIP projects. Unfortunately, they're all very important, but we're trying to cut down on some of that. From an operating standpoint, similar to Grove City, or not similar to Grove City, we have decided not to hire any seasonal help this year. We're stopping with any travel. We've got no ability to do seminars and those sorts of things that we all depend on. Cut down on overtime, which of course kind of flew out the window with our flooding that's happened these last couple of days, but we're trying to manage that as much as possible. And we typically have a good bit of overtime with our employees, but that's just going to have to cut down some. We're stopping with some of our economic development programs. We've spent quite a bit of money on that. We're shutting that down temporarily. Stopping with our open houses that we have to bring the public in for two reasons. One of the social distancing, the other is the cost associated with that. Software licenses will not be renewed or converted to less expensive options. Our parks programs, for similar reasons to the open houses, are being delayed. So there's just a lot of things that are impactful on us, and the biggest thing is the unpredictability of it, because we don't know how soon it's going to turn around, and we don't know whether it may have another dip. So our finance director had gone through and just sort of predicted or established what would happen at different levels of reduction in our revenues, so that we could plan accordingly and sort of make incremental cuts to our budget as we go along, understanding what we need to do. Fortunately, we do have a reasonably solid rainy day fund, but you don't want to dip into that too quickly and too heavily without knowing what the future will hold. So it's interesting. It's probably the unknown, as we all know, and those things we can't control is usually what causes the most stress on our personal and work lives, and that's where we stand with this. We just don't know for sure where we'll be in the next 6 months to a year.
Yeah, that's a good point. The unknown can be a little stressful there. Jackie, I guess I think of Upper Arlington as kind of this bedroom community over there. I guess I'm not seeing, or I don't think of it as having a lot of industry and things that some of these other communities have. So maybe tell us a little bit about what impacts you're seeing.
Yeah, so Upper Arlington is a little bit unique that we are mostly a bedroom community. About 54% of our revenue is from income taxes. Another 20% of that is from property taxes. And then the other major contributor, about 12%, is just charges for services. So like, Dan and Cindy, there's a little bit of the unknown out there. Our latest report did show a decrease in revenues. And like Cindy said, some of that is because of the tax deadline extensions. So we still don't really have a grasp on what that deduction is going to be. We did report with our city council the actions that we're taking, and we are operating on a 10% budget cut as of now. Council did not decide not to take action on that, just to leave us flexibility at this point. But at mid-year, we're hoping to make a decision on what that budget cut needs to look at. And with that, our professional development budgets were cut. There's no travel. A lot of materials and supplies have been cut. And we did not hire an intern this summer, and we're trying to limit the hires of seasonal staff as much as possible. But many of us we're continue to operate in the unknown. We know that obviously April is going to be a hit, and we hope that May starts to bounce back. We just don't know what those numbers are yet at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of a wait and see here. Larry, the Hilliard, I guess I think of that as a pretty diverse community over there. What are you hearing within your organization as far as budget impacts?
Brian, we made cuts to our 2020 capital budget early in the pandemic. We were aggressive on that, went to council with a reduced budget, and we're currently running the 5, 10, 15% budget reduction scenarios for our operating budget. Like other communities have mentioned, we canceled all travel and we have reduced our training dollars for the remainder of 2020. Our finance department is closely tracking future revenue loss. We don't have a percent of loss yet. In this session, I think Dan mentioned 25%, upwards of 25%, and Cindy mentioned 15%. Early in the pandemic, I was hearing 12% was the magic number, but it seems like as of late, communities are looking toward that 15, 18% range. As far as staffing, we are committed to our full-time staff who provide quality services to the community. My department was in the process of scheduling interviews for seasonal employees the week before the pandemic hit. Since then, we've decided not to hire any seasonal or part-time employees for the remainder of this year. Also, we have hired 2 key positions during the pandemic, and I've noticed several other communities within Central Ohio have as well. I'm surprised by the number of job postings that I see each week through International City Managers Association as well as APWA. I see those regionally and nationally, so there's still some movement in our sector, and perhaps this is just one indicator of a quick recovery.
All right, very good. Lewis, now your organization is a little bit different than some of the other guests that we've heard from. What impacts do you anticipate here in the coming weeks or months?
Okay, Brian, just so folks know, we're a water and sewer. So all of our revenue comes directly from the water and sewer services that we provide. There's no tax flow of money into our organization. So we have to live on that usage income. I was concerned a month ago that maybe we would see a dip in usage and a dip in revenue, primarily from our commercial and industrial users, but that is not the case. And of course, it helps. We have a large toilet paper manufacturer in our community that's in our top 10 users. So our revenues have stayed steady. In fact, there was a slight uptick last month, and I attribute that primarily to folks staying at home and folks using their homes throughout the day. So right now, we are going to continue as planned with our capital improvements. We're going to continue with all of our maintenance because I think that's the most cost-effective approach for us in the long term. We don't want to see these assets decline at all because they have a direct relation to our level of service. We did, talking about interns, we were going to try actually 2 interns this year, but more so just because of the office usage, we decided to postpone that and hopefully pick that up next year. So good on the revenue. I'm still caught though with that, and we're going to be taking a close look at revenue throughout this year to see if there's any long-term trends that appear.
All right, thanks for that input there. So I guess as businesses begin to open and employees are starting to go back to work in the office, I guess we're starting to see some new things happening here in the next probably couple weeks. And I guess for us, or for me, our office really never closed, but it was highly encouraged that we all work remotely. So with the exception of a couple of my colleagues, the rest of us we're still choosing to work from home, and really because I guess we've seen the successes of how we can work from home and that work environment. Now there's definitely some challenges with that. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I know for a couple of the folks in our group, childcare is a major issue, and since they don't have that, they kind of need to stay at home there. So I guess I'd like to hear from each of you on how your organization is or will be transitioning back, and maybe what do you see as those challenges getting back, say, into your office space. So Lewis, let's start with you and kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so safety of our employees and keeping the water on, those are my 2 biggest concerns with our organization. And my observation in the last couple of weeks has led me to believe that most folks are returning to their normal routines and social gatherings. And again, this is just out in the general public. And as a result, I think we're going to see a second wave of infections across the state, which may reach a little deeper into our respective communities. And compound that fact, the infection rates in offices and enclosed spaces are a lot greater. So we're going to continue to limit our staff in the office. We're going to keep our field crews separate from the office and have them report directly to our plants and work sites. One article that I thought very insightful, both at a personal level and from a work environment, was put together by Aaron Bromage, professor at Dartmouth. Put together some studies on how people were infected here in the last couple of months. And it is very interesting how indoor work environments, air circulation patterns, and the time that you're in physical contact with somebody that's affected increases your chance of getting the COVID virus. So based on that information, along just with what I'm seeing in the community, we are really being cautious on transitioning back into the office, and we're meeting our customers' expectations. We're serving everyone that we need to. The water is going to stay on, and so I think that's the best approach for us, albeit conservative. I think it's best for our customers in the long haul.
Yeah, I think that number of people in the office is a key component. I know our first phase of this approach to going back is only 30% of the staff could be there. And so you've got to get an app out and essentially sign up to be in the office that day. And once they hit that max, that's it. That's it for the day, and maybe try to sign up for another day later in the week. So Dan, how about you? Share kind of how your organization's transitioning back, or if you've already kind of transitioned back, how that's going.
Sure, and Lewis couldn't have said it any better. It's pretty intense standpoint. First, one of the first things we did was develop protocols if we're going to open our offices back up, and we're going to continue to have visitors in our interactions. We need to have protocols established on how those are handled. So we wrote protocols for our staff. You'll wear your mask if you're not in your office. We won't have our typical lunchroom gatherings or pre-day meetings and that sort of stuff. Drive, own individual truck to the site you're going to, et cetera, all the things we've talked about in the past. But then we established protocols also for those public that are visiting our buildings. And so my facilities staff was clearly worked hard at that to put that together, those plexiglass plates that you'll see at the restaurants and grocery stores and such for any of our public lobbies and areas where they'd be interacting with transfer of plans or monies or those sorts of things, and putting up stations for hand washing, making masks available if they don't have one. We decided not to require people to wear masks, the public to wear masks, simply because it's you don't want to get in that argument about rights and that sort of stuff, but we highly encourage it. And we provide masks for those folks that will be visiting us in the lobbies. And our lobbies are pretty small, so we request only one person be in there at a time. We also developed protocols for our vendors because we have a lot of facilities work going on with some HVAC replacements and roof replacements and those sorts of things where they're working inside buildings, as well as meetings with folks like you, Brian, and other people on the line, our consultants. We need to meet with them on a rather routine basis. So we put together protocols on how to handle those as well. And they're required that the visitors, vendors come in and are given those protocols before they visit our site, and that they agree to comply with them, or they won't be our vendors or consultants anymore. But we took a phased approach to this, kind of to the big picture here. Our first phase is what we're in right now, which is a limited return to in-person work by those folks that have been working from home. We're starting to do that. I myself am going into the office once or twice a week. Others are doing the same thing, and we're trying to shift the time as well so that we're not all in there at the same time. Our field work is it's spring and summer, construction's coming up, maintenance of grounds is a big thing now. So we're trying to make sure we're handling that properly, but more and more people are coming into the shop to get their equipment and do that sort of thing. So the focus is on work that can be done independently or in small teams as much as possible, and maintaining that physical distancing. And as we kind of round into phase 2, and we don't have dates on these because we don't know what the CDC or state protocols and guidelines may be, but as we get into phase 2, we'll have additional employees starting to return to work in person. We'll resume some of those activities we've done in the past in small groups. The governor is allowing fitness facilities to open, and parks I'm sure will open here at some point as well. And we'll have to begin allowing that to happen as we go into phase 2. Some of those, we all have Memorial Day parades and July 4th events and concerts on the green, those sorts of things that aren't going to happen yet, but eventually as we get into phase 3, we can allow larger but somewhat small groups to begin entering the buildings and gathering on public lawns and conduct regular business with us. Ultimately hoping to get back to the overused term of the new normal as we go into phase 4, hoping that will happen sooner rather than later, but not just going back to business as usual, but taking the lessons we've learned from this unusual time and applying those to our work processes as well as our safety conditions and features and activities throughout our day-to-day work lives. So we're looking, again, the unknown is a big part of it. There's no time frames associated with these phases, but we tried to be as definitive and organized with them as we could so that we could be helpful to maintain the same level of service or close to it to our citizens and keep everybody safe and sound.
So it sounds like having a plan that's flexible is definitely
Yes.
key in these situations. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, a little tidbit about Dan, he's a huge fitness guru. So hopefully in one of these future phases, Dan will be able to lead us all in one of his intense workouts, I hope.
We can do a virtual HIIT routine or something, Brian, if you like.
There we go. I like that. Let's see here. So Larry, how about you touch on how things might look transitioning back over there in Hilliard?
Yes, earlier in the webinar, I mentioned our 3 work groups and our staffing plan. And we've had consensus on this plan all along, and all of our team members agree that we have this really great plan. The challenge for us is following this plan over a long period of time. And I had these discussions earlier in the week with Dan and Lewis and discussing some of the challenges that they've seen in their organizations. And I think there are similarities in all of our organizations. And we talked about, self-control and really our thoughts or actions during this pandemic are really at the individual level, and we all see things differently, but how do we make it all come together? That's the difficult part, because at the end of the day, it's very easy to become complacent. I even see this in myself early on. First week I was on high alert. Now I've backed off some things, and I need reminded frequently that we've got to keep on this course to make it to the finish line. So that's really been the challenge. The sourcing of custodial and disinfecting supplies has been extremely challenging for our organization. And I think our general everyday roles have changed. I know I was asked by the city manager's office to lead a pandemic recovery team for health and safety. And this is not the safety side I'm okay with, given my work history, but the public health side is not an area that I have experience in. I'm the guy that fixes infrastructure. So I've had to learn my way through the public health field, and I've learned a lot through the process. Fortunately, in my MPA program, there were a lot of folks in the public health and social services areas that I was able to learn from. So that information that I gathered there has been useful, but I'm still wading through that process.
All right, very good. Jackie, I know that you've got a mixture of folks that are working from home and a mixture that are coming in and reporting in. So kind of how do you see this transitioning happening within your organization?
Yeah, so for the folks that continue to work from home, like I said, they're doing so. But for our public works staff and electrical and fleet, we started back on May 11th. Everybody back in the office full time. But what we have changed is how we are reporting the work. So I know Dan mentioned that, we're not eating lunch together anymore. We're not all in the same break room anymore. So when we come in the morning, staff reports to their separation units, and each unit has about 10 people or less. And so we have one for fleet, we have one for electrical, and then we broke public works up into 2 areas. And since we're not having meetings right now, we were able to use our training center for another report to work location. And then staff is just working through lunch. So it shortened their day by a half hour, because we're not breaking to have a formal lunch all together. Instead, we're eating on the job as we can, just trying to continue that separation. For the city as a whole, and opening up our buildings did open up to the public this past Monday. And as of right now, the city is requiring that guests in the building wear a mask. That may be changing as the governor's orders are changing. And then as far as, our parks and stuff, we are planning to open 2 of our pools on June 8th and trying to resume a different kind of summer camp for our kids in the community with smaller group sizes, and then starting to open up, field space as it allows for non-contact sports. Something else that I thought was interesting, being a bedroom community, that came up today was people have started to apply for block party permits again. And we came to the conclusion that we can't issue block party permits until the orders or health advisories allow for gatherings over 50 people. So I thought that was an interesting bit that we discussed today. But like everybody else, we are also having a problem getting enough disinfection supplies in. You know, Clorox wipes are a hot commodity right now, so we can't rely on those for our, you know, routine wipe downs. So we are looking at different products and doing training of these not typical products for our staff on how to do disinfection throughout our daily days. So it's definitely changing what we're all used to as far as our normal work routine. We're not used to cleaning while we're at work, but that's becoming part of our new normal.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a saying now, it's like you touch it, you clean it. And that's what you're expected to do. If you touch the copy machine, you've got to wipe it all down when you're done. I'm glad you brought up the parks and pools. I mean, those are definitely things that I think a lot of us use in these summer warmer months. So it's interesting to hear how you guys are handling that. Cindy, I assume there's probably a lot of similarities between you guys and up Arlington, as far as transitioning back and a lot of things that you're dealing with. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Certainly, yeah, a lot of similarities between all of the communities here. We are targeting opening our municipal facilities to the public June 1st. So in preparation for that, we recognize it's going to require, you know, some of our administrative staff to come back into the office so that they're able to greet and help customers that may come in. So we've installed the sneeze guards, the plexiglass at our reception areas, and in workspaces where it's not possible for people to be 6 feet apart, we've put up the same type of plexiglass dividers. We are initially at least going to require visitors and guests to wear masks and encouraging them to bring their own, but if they don't have them, we are providing them. As far as other staff that are successfully working from home, you know, like I mentioned, not so much in public service, but several of our other city departments have successfully been able to work from home. We're encouraging everyone who can to continue to work from home, likely for as long as we can, just to try to minimize the number of people coming into the buildings, maintaining that separation. You know, that then requires less disinfection. You know, if you have less people going and touching the bathrooms and the copy areas, then that can help with supplies as well that are all in high demand. As far as, you know, parks and programming, I feel like that's a moving target. It's a little bit difficult to know exactly how or what and when things are going to open. For us, we have, we canceled all of our Memorial Day plans. We usually have a parade and a ceremony at the cemetery, and that's canceled. We have officially canceled our fireworks for July 4th. We do have an ambition of opening our public pool July 1st, but that's still to be determined. Trying to review and understand the guidelines from the governor and how that would actually look and if it's actually feasible. So really wanting to do that. I think everybody's goal is to make that happen by July 1st, but there's still some evaluation going on how we make that happen. Similar with our parks programs, you know, trying to bring back programs that we are able to maintain the class sizes that are required and the spacing that's required. For us, both Little League and adult baseball has been a hot topic. We postponed our summer season that typically starts the first week of May and are pushing that to kind of a later summer and fall season to try to accommodate the guidance that's out there. So it's definitely going to look a little different when we fully resume, and it's going to be drawn out over a period of time. It's not something that we can snap our fingers and just everybody come back. So we're continuing to use the things that we've put in and make the adjustments so that we can slowly reopen and hopefully avoid that second wave.
Yeah, thanks for that insight there. Appreciate that. We've got about a half an hour left. A couple more topics that we want to touch on here, so we can transition on to those. So after finally about 2.5 months, I was finally able to get a haircut yesterday, and it was really interesting. I'm sitting there with my barber, and we ended up spending a lot of time talking about the morale of our families and coworkers during this time. And I think that's such an important component here because everybody's been thrown into something that they've just never experienced before. And so for me, the video calls have been very important in connecting and keeping that morale up. Fortunate, we've got a recognition program that allows us supervisors to do small things for our team, such as like giving out gift cards for different accomplishments. And so I like to do that and like post just small little things that people have done to help me out with something. And that goes up on our intranet. So everybody in the company gets to see that. And it just kind of nice to give them just a little appreciation shout out. So I'd like to kind of move to a conversation about the morale within your organizations and what things you all are doing to try to keep a positive attitude within your communities there. So Cindy, let's start with you and kind of hear a little bit about what's going on in Grove City.
Yeah, I think that morale is not as bad as you would think it could be in a time like this in our organization. I think that we have really strong leadership in emergency management. We have really good communication, and we try to make sure that we push that down to all lines of our employees. So currently we're doing briefings. We initially started every day COVID-19 briefings with senior management and business and community partners. We're now doing those just Tuesdays and Fridays, and at our last get together, I shared with you what those incident action plans look like. So we're still doing those and sending those out to all city staff so they know what we're doing. But I will say that I think that folks are starting to get lonely. You know, we've kind of forced people into a little bit of isolation in their daily work activities. You know, we have had some staff ask us if they can ride together. You know, we kind of put the policy out there that you got to stay in individual vehicles and not work together and maintain that distance. And I think that I was maybe surprised by that question because, you know, I keep stressing how important it is to keep that distance. But I think, you know, without speaking for them, that it just comes from a little bit of loneliness and wanting that normalcy and that interaction with other humans. But overall, I have to commend my staff. They've been very resilient. They've shown great leadership in leading our staff to get through this pandemic and trying to keep morale up. So I think that as much as we're able to, still having some of those personal interactions, like you mentioned, the video conference, we always, at least on internal meetings, just encourage or almost require that people turn the video on as long as technology is cooperating so that we can see each other and interact and read that body language and just check in on each other. So that's kind of what we're seeing here.
Yeah, very cool. Dan, how about you over there in Upper Arlington, or Worthington, I'm sorry.
I'm still in Worthington. No, like, it was interesting what Cindy had just said, because one of the things I was going to mention is you can't, you know, when you're reading somebody's morale or how they're feeling or how their day is going, a lot of it is based on body language, and you just can't gauge that, especially with the staff that I don't see that often. I'm not having video conferencing with, and they all say they're doing great, but I'm sure, as Cindy mentioned, there's some loneliness and also, unfortunately, you know, we've had a few family tragedies in our department, and we're a smaller group and pretty close, and it's hard to give that support to one another when when that sort of stuff happens to them, and it's different within their lives. One of our guys lost his father the other day, and we're not going to be able to go to the funeral. Will there be a funeral? It's very interesting times to go through that kind of stuff. So that ability to have a family atmosphere kind of erodes when you're in this sort of situation. And so all the things Cindy said were apt and appropriate. I guess the one thing that is really phenomenal to me is as I mentioned at our last discussion, is these guys are really first responders. They're out there in the thick of things at sometimes the worst moments in sewers or floods or whatever, and they're still kicking butt, and they're still happy to do that and have a good attitude about it. So that's just really nice to see. I'm sure on the other side, again, there's some nervousness about potential cuts. Certainly my goal, council's goal, and our administration's goal is to not have to cut anybody's jobs, and it will be a last resort. But that, you could say that, but that people still get nervous about it. So that's something that we also need to recognize too, is that ability to acknowledge their worth, their value, and that will continue to be the case.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Louis, I remember the last time we spoke, you had, I thought, just a very positive attitude towards what was going on. And so and I just got the sense that in your organization, most people just had a very positive attitude. So maybe, yeah, tell us a little bit about morale down there in your organization.
Yeah, Brian, I think positive morale, it never happens by accident. And as a leader of the organization, and even my supervisor, morale is something that we talk about on a regular basis. It's important because we want people to want to come to work. We want people to work together. And not everybody has to be the best of friends, but we want to create a comfortable work environment where we can be productive, be freely creative, and get things done. Make the best of our 8 hours at work. So morale is something that we work on a regular basis. We have programs such as Employee of the Quarter. We celebrate birthdays, major holidays, and that type of thing as a group. And we don't have those necessarily now. We're getting ready to hold our first virtual Employee of the Quarter luncheon, which this ought to be interesting. But overall, I think our morale is good, and it's requiring more effort, I feel, on my part. I'm seeing field crews each week. I'm trying to meet those folks on site, outside, of course, and talk with them and check in with how their families are doing and how work is going beyond just the email, because you've got to be careful with the remote technology. It's easy to take things out of context. As Dan mentioned, body language is important. You don't get body language over an email, but sometimes people can get an attitude over a word misconstrued. So it's important that we have that face-to-face conversation while staying safe. And those interactions are just so key. So communication, reassurance, those are the things that we're offering our employees. And just picking up the phone from time to time to talk to one another. So I've tasked our employees with when you pick up a phone or have a few minutes, just pick up the phone and call somebody that you don't normally work with and see how they're doing. Of course, we're still holding our staff meetings, but remotely through a Zoom platform. So I think we're getting through it, but it is something that is high on my priority. As I said, I want to keep the water on, keep our employees safe, but morale's right up there. And it's always in the back of my mind, because if you lose morale, I think you can lose an organization and your efficiency pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I think, yeah, we're fortunate we've got all this technology in place, but it's not a 100% replacement. We definitely having that face-to-face, even if it's just a little bit, like you said, is definitely very good to have. Jackie, how about now we're back to Upper Arlington. So how about you tell us a little bit about Upper Arlington and the morale and what's going on with your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed with how everyone's done. I know that, I try to check in with staff here and there, and I miss them as much as they miss each other. So I try to reach out and do a video chat one-on-one with different staff members and just see how they're doing and talk about their days and how different things are now. And I do, staff meeting check-ins. And when I'm in the office, I check in with Public Works. I just can't say how proud I am of, our first responders in Public Works and how they've handled the flooding events. This is our second one since we've been in this coronavirus pandemic. And, them just stepping up and willing to work whatever hours it takes to respond to our community I've been so grateful for it. It's been absolutely wonderful. We are in Public Works Week, National Public Works Week. So we typically, I know many of you guys do this too. We have a celebration this week with staff, and we usually do a big lunch and have a proclamation from council. And for us, much of that's been put on hold. Instead of a celebration, they got donuts from me. Not the same, for sure. But just knowing that we will try to get back together and get on track with some of these fun events that we used to do as a group to build morale. And I know organizations like APWA have helped too. One of the recent celebrations that we had was Administrative Professionals Day, and we couldn't do our annual Shadow Box event, so APWA was kind enough to come up with another virtual concept where you could nominate your employees, administrative professionals, for a gift card. And so that things like that, I'm just looking for more opportunities like that, have been really helpful.
Oh, that's cool to hear. Larry, over there in Hilliard, why don't you share with us a little bit about the morale within the organization?
Brian, I can't say enough about our team. I'm extremely proud of how they've dealt with the change caused by this pandemic. And each day we are living the change described in the book, Who Moved My Cheese? With that said, our team members are stepping up every day. People in our organization are coming together, and I have noticed an improvement in morale on our team and throughout the city as a whole. I'm seeing a greater sense of camaraderie and togetherness on our team. Camaraderie is a theme that's prevalent throughout public works at all levels. So it's always been there, but I've seen that increase over the last couple of months. And our focus during this time has really been around how do we get to know each other better, and how can we support each other better than we have in the past. And I've just noticed a general stronger willingness to help one another and also the community. I know several communities have dealt with drainage issues over the last couple of days and flooding, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and now we have all these drainage matters to deal with. And our group has had a lot thrown at them over the last 2 months, and they've handled it well. And I think through this experience, we'll be much stronger long term. And this really goes back to our initial focus and commitment on servant and supportive leadership. What I'm noticing on a personal level outside of work, even at home, is things that were major issues prior to the pandemic really aren't major issues anymore. And I think we're all learning lessons that will make us stronger as individuals, as teams, as work groups, as organizations going forward.
Yeah, that's awesome, Larry. I think you're absolutely right. That's a very, very good point you made there. All right, so kind of getting close to the end here. One of the bigger challenges that some of us are facing is how to engage the public for projects, since we can't gather in large groups. And so this, in the past, this has been done for council meetings and public meetings for project input and other important meetings. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how your organizations are engaging or planning on engaging with the public in the coming months. And Cindy, you mentioned the other day to me, Grove City usually does the touch a truck, and I think a lot of communities do the touch a truck. And obviously that can't happen now, but you really take, I think, a unique approach to this. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to unmute there. You'd think that I would be good at that by now with all of the WebEx and online meetings we do, so apology. Yeah, so obviously, like everybody else mentioned, it's National Public Works Week, and this is usually a big deal for our staff. We do a proclamation that the mayor comes and presents at a lunch, and then we kick off our summer sizzle concerts that we do in our town center, and we started doing an annual Touch a Truck in conjunction with that event, and this year we're just not able to do that. And so our staff and our communications team got creative, and we started taking videos and photos of a lot of the different equipment that we use, and provided some statistics and stats and information on those different pieces of equipment and how they're used, and they work together to develop a virtual touch a truck event. So it's essentially a video that slides through a lot of the equipment that we use on a daily basis and how we use it, shows some videos of it in action, and some cool facts on what's going on. So that's one way that we're trying to engage and still recognize and celebrate the strong work that our public works and staff do all the time that isn't necessarily always seen. So yeah, always just want to give them a shout out. They're doing great work. And Larry, you're absolutely right there. They have been thrown so many different curves at them lately, and their response has been nothing but spectacular.
Yeah, I just think that was a really cool story that you shared there, and I know other communities are doing things. Like, I was actually prepping for this webinar last night, and I'm sitting in the basement. I hear all these sirens and horns, and family and I, we went outside. We're like, what is that? And yeah, it's the public service department coming through with fire trucks and vacuum trucks and snow trucks and school buses, and it was like a parade out there just to say hey to the community. And I had seen neighbors I hadn't seen in months here, so it was kind of cool to get folks out and see some people. So yeah, you guys are doing some, I think, pretty cool and unique things to engage the community. Dan, I know bin openings in many places have happened in person or do happen in person. However, Worthington, I know, is doing things through other means here. So can you share with us how you're handling these sorts of situations?
Yeah, we've done Bid Express now for some time and found that to be coincidentally, we had done it before the pandemic issues and protocols, but we found that to be extremely helpful so that there's really no issues with physical distancing. We can have a bid opening, it's online, people see the results, and we can share the results immediately. So that's a good way to handle that. We're thankful we already had that in place. And as far as public interaction, engagement, and communication, we rely really very heavily on social media in the ways that we had done it in the past with Facebook and Twitter and our website.
So Jackie, and I know over there in Upper Arlington, you guys have been doing a lot of council meetings, I believe virtually. So can you touch on how that's all working and if there's a public component to that as well?
Yeah, so for our council meetings, we've been using Zoom along with Swagit to stream that live to our community. And what we ask the community to do is to email us an hour before the meeting, and then we can make them part of that Zoom meeting so that they can do their public comments that way. And most recently, we held our Board of Zoning and Planning meeting virtually, and it went off really well. I think one benefit of this for me has been having Monday night council meetings from the comfort of my home. I'm sure many of us have seen where we dress professionally on the top and have pajama pants on the bottom. And when a council meeting has been going 2.5 or 3 hours, that's been much appreciated. This is really public meeting season for many of us. Typically, we're getting ready for our construction projects to start, and it's definitely been hard to communicate with the residents that we're impacting with construction. What we've come up with is for each project, we now make a one-page brochure that covers everything they need to know about that project and the limits of it and what exactly we're doing, along with all of our contact information and how to contact us so that we can share plans with them. And then additionally, in that brochure that we mail out, we include a frequently asked questions sheets that go through those questions that we know that we always get at public meetings, and just try to answer as many questions proactively as we can. So definitely some adjustments to how we've been doing public engagement. But like they said, social media has been a big platform of ours too, to try to get video messages out to the community and let them know that we are still here for them.
Yeah, those public involvement meetings are definitely unique. I know I get involved in quite a few of those, and yeah, they've typically always just been in-person type meetings, and now that that's changing, I know we've got a project that we're in conjunction with ODOT. We are using a service called publicinput.com that is essentially creating a website that's a virtual public meeting. And I think one of the cool things about that is while you can do a live meeting, you can also do something that's even pre-recorded and have displays set up. So instead of a public meeting happening, say at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday night, you can have it occur over maybe a two-week period, and so people can kind of come in and out of that virtual public meeting as it fits their schedule. So there's definitely some tools out there that I think folks are starting to use that will be very interesting to see how it all works there. Larry and Hilliard, how are you guys engaging the public?
Well, Brian, that's largely handled by our communications department, and they've done an outstanding job during the pandemic. This is a new department. Our director, he's been with the city less than 2 years or so. Prior to him arriving, public outreach and communication was handled at the department level. So over the last 2 years, they have done an outstanding job, but their role has really changed through the pandemic. And I have worked more closely with them over the last couple of months. They're extremely busy. They work long hours with the updates that come down from the state level. So they're monitoring those weekly and then providing a response, and then public outreach or communication piece. So that's been really challenging for them. Also, our Recreation and Parks Department has taken more of a community outreach and social service approach, since many of their programs are closed for the remainder of this year. So they are doing outreach in the community. They have worked with local nonprofits and churches to reach out through the community to provide meals, for example, and other outreach activities. As a whole, the city has learned so much more about technology over the last 2 months, and there has been a stronger trust in technology as we lean on the technology that's out there. So we are learning as an organization, and as a result, we are now looking at a work from home policy. The city initially had a no work from home policy, and now we're looking at rescinding that policy and drafting a new work from home policy that would apply to certain individuals with certain type of functions at the director level for approval. So there are good outcomes that have come out of the pandemic that we can use long term.
Yeah, very cool. Now, Lewis, being a sewer district down there, I'm guessing you probably engage the public much differently than many of these other communities. So are you guys doing any public engagement or have been doing any?
Well, our public engagement has primarily been through our website, especially as it relates to project updates. And we've tasked our staff with providing those weekly now, as opposed to maybe once a month. We're being more proactive on that front. And we're getting ready to start a large water line project where we're doing a lot of service line replacements. So we've sent out a couple of letters, and we are communicating through that at a little higher level of effort to keep folks informed as to what's going on. And of course, if we need to, we'll meet folks in person on site. Our customer service department has been instructed we're not going in homes at this point unless it's a life or property emergency type of thing. But so we're trying to keep safe that way. But communication is challenging when things are normal. So we're trying to utilize what we can, and most folks down here are utilizing our website for those updates. So we're finding it beneficial. Our office is still officially closed to the public, along with our drive-through window is still closed. We're using the night drop for those type of payments. But as I mentioned before, we have the voice over internet phone software. So when customers call in, they get the same level of service, they get the same response as before. So that communication is still there. that engagement is still there. And we don't normally host the large type of events like you would see with an ODOT project or something where you'd be inviting, entire communities. And we just don't have that level of a project as some of the larger transportation projects would see. So I think right now we're just going to stick with the website, the letters, and the phone communication, and see how it goes.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how we're using this technology to work within our organizations, but it also seems like the public is using the technology as well, and through social media. And I know I mentioned this publicinput.com, and I had seen one project out there where ODOT, and they had linked through social media, whether it's through Twitter, Next Door Neighbor, Facebook, and they ended up having I believe it was close to 1,600 people attend their virtual public meeting. So if you have the right communication and outreach, you can get quite a few to attend those types of meetings. So just we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got a couple of questions here. So if you got any questions, feel free to put those in. Maybe just a quick note is, like our last webinar, we will be sending out PDHs to everybody through an email here in the next couple of weeks. So if you don't happen to get that, just reach out to us and we'll make sure you get that. I want to see, I'm looking through the questions here. Here's one for Cindy, and somebody asked if you could share the name of the mobile health app that you used.
So our app was actually developed by our IS department. So it's not a app that you're able to purchase off the street. They host it on our intranet site that with a login to our system, our staff are able to access from their mobile phone or just from our intranet site on a local computer. So that's how we're handling that.
Okay, very good. And there was one other question here. Forgive me, I'm not sure who this one is directed to, but it's asking what types of work assignments are you having crews do from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m.? Is that maybe you, Cindy?
Yeah, so every rainy day activity that we never end up having time to. So all of our equipment is serviced and in tip-top shape because that's some of the activities we've been doing at night. One advantage that we have is that our crews are able to canvass the city for street lights that are out more frequently now, checking those out during the evening. We also have a remodel of one of our service department complex buildings that was already planned and underway here. So that is some that we're doing in-house primarily. So they've been able to work on that during those evening hours. So those are just some examples, but yeah, we're still able to keep them busy even once the sun goes down.
All right, great. Well, that is all of the questions that I see there. We have posted a few handouts down in the handout section. Feel free to look at that are relating to ethics for engineers, a roundabout update, virtual public involvement lessons learned webinar. So feel free to take a look at those. I do want to thank our guests for joining us today and taking the time out of their day, especially with all the flooding going on. I know you guys are super busy right now, so really appreciate that. And thanks Victoria and LTAP for hosting this today. So with that, we will conclude and stay tuned for future APWA and LTAP lunch and learns in the coming months. Have a good day.
Thanks for hosting, Brian.